May 4th, 1949, a thick fog rolls over the hills east of Turin. Visibility is near zero. A three-engine Fiat G212 aircraft, carrying the entire first team of Torino Football Club, circles above the city, trying to find the runway. The pilot, Pierluigi Meroni, cannot see the ground. He cannot see the airport. He cannot see the Basilica of Superga, a massive Baroque church that sits on a hilltop at an altitude of 2,200 feet, directly in the flight path of the approach to Turin. At 5 minutes past 5 in the afternoon, the aircraft slams into the retaining wall of the Basilica. There are no survivors. 31 people die on impact. Among them are 18 of the greatest footballers Italy has ever produced. The team that was supposed to dominate European football for a decade is erased from the earth in less than a second. They were called Grande Torino. For 5 consecutive seasons, from 1943 to 1949, they won the Italian league title. They did not just win, they demolished. In the 1947-48 season, Torino scored 125 goals in 40 matches, a record that stood for decades. They beat Roma 7-1, they beat Genoa 9-1, they beat Alessandria 10-0. They were not a football team, they were a machine built by a visionary coach named Vittorio Pozzo, the same man who had led Italy to 2 consecutive World Cup victories in 1934 and 1938. Pozzo had retired from the national team by 1948, but his fingerprints were all over this Torino side. They played a system that was ahead of its time, an attacking formation built around movement, pressing, and a relentless tempo that no opponent could match. They were admired across Europe. They were feared across Italy. In the spring of 1949, with 4 matches remaining in the season, they led Serie A by 4 points. The 5th consecutive title was all but secured. But Grande Torino was more than a club team. At the time, the Italian national team drew the majority of its starting 11 from one club. That club was Torino. When the national team played, 10 of the 11 players on the pitch wore the maroon shirt of Torino on weekends. Their captain, Valentino Mazzola, was also the captain of Italy. Mazzola was not just a footballer, he was a force of nature, a midfielder with an engine that never stopped, a shot that could break the net, and a presence on the pitch that made everyone around him play better. He had grown up in poverty, the son of a laborer who died when Valentino was a child. He had worked in a factory before football found him. By 1949, at the age of 30, he was the most famous athlete in Italy, the symbol of a nation rebuilding itself from the rubble of the Second World War. His son, Sandro Mazzola, would grow up to become one of the greatest players Inter Milan ever produced, winning 2 European Cups and playing in a World Cup final. But Sandro was only 6 years old when his father died on Superga. He would spend his entire career chasing a ghost he never met. The tragedy of Superga did not just destroy a club team, it destroyed a generation of Italian football. Of the 18 Torino players who died on that hillside, 10 were current Italian internationals. The spine of the national team, from the goalkeeper to the center forward, vanished in a single afternoon. The Italian Federation was left with a squad of reserves and youth players to represent the country at the 1950 World Cup in Brazil. The team that traveled to South America was a shadow of what it should have been. Many of the replacement players refused to fly, traumatized by Superga, and insisted on traveling by ship. The journey took 2 weeks. When they arrived, they were exhausted, disoriented, and emotionally shattered. Italy was eliminated in the group stage, losing to Sweden, a team they would have dismantled with the squad that died on the mountain. The disaster at Superga was not just a club tragedy. It was a national wound that would take Italy 2 decades to heal. The day of the crash, May 4, 1949, was supposed to be a celebration. Torino had just returned from Lisbon, where they had played a friendly match against Benfica. The match had been arranged as a gesture of solidarity. Benfica's captain, Francisco Ferreira, was retiring, and the Portuguese club had invited Grande Torino to Lisbon to honor him. The match ended in a 4-3 victory for the Italians. After the game, the teams dined together. Photographs from that evening showed the Torino players laughing, relaxed, unaware that most of them had less than 24 hours to live. The flight back to Turin was uneventful until the final approach. The weather in Turin that afternoon was terrible. Low clouds, heavy rain, visibility dropping by the minute. The control tower at Turin Air Italia airport warned the pilot to divert. Meroni decided to attempt the landing anyway. He had flown this approach dozens of times. He knew the route. He did not know that the fog around the Superga hill was thicker than it had ever been. At an altitude of 2,000 feet, the basilica was invisible. The aircraft struck it at full cruising speed. The aftermath of the crash was a national convulsion. News of the disaster spread across Italy within hours. Factories shut down, shops closed, schools dismissed their students. People gathered in piazzas and wept. The funeral, held 4 days later in Turin, drew an estimated 500,000 mourners. The coffins were carried through the streets on the shoulders of the surviving club staff and players from rival teams. Juventus, Torino's eternal rival, sent their entire squad to carry the coffins. In the stands of the Stadio Philadelphia, where Torino had played their home matches, the seats were left empty for the rest of the season. The club did not forfeit its remaining 4 fixtures. Instead, each of their opponents agreed to field their youth teams in a gesture of respect. Torino won the title by default, awarded the Scudetto by the Italian Federation in the hospital room of the club president, who had not been on the flight and was too ill to attend the funeral. The trophy was lifted by no one. The Basilica of Superga became a pilgrimage site overnight. To this day, every May 4th, thousands of Torino fans walk the steep road from the city to the Basilica, a climb of several miles uphill, to stand at the memorial plaque that marks the exact spot where the aircraft struck the wall. The names of the 31 victims are engraved in the stone. The ceremony is silent. At the moment the crash occurred, 5:05 in the afternoon, the crowd observes a minute of silence broken only by the reading of the names. One by one, each name is called out into the mountain air. Each name is answered by the crowd with a single word: presente, present. They are gone. They have been gone for over 75 years. But for the people of Turin, for the supporters of Torino, for the families who lost fathers and brothers and sons on that hillside, they are still present. They always will be. The legacy of Superga extends beyond Torino. It changed how football clubs think about travel. Before 1949, it was common for entire first-team squads to travel together on a single aircraft. After Superga, clubs began dividing their players across multiple flights, a practice that continues in some forms to this day, most notably at Real Madrid and Manchester United, who never fly their entire executive staff and playing squad on the same plane. The disaster also accelerated the development of instrument landing systems and ground-based radar approaches at European airports. The technology that guides aircraft safely to the runway in zero visibility was, in part, born from the investigation into what went wrong on the approach to Turin on that foggy afternoon in May. Thousands of lives have been saved because of the lessons learned from a single crash that killed 31 people. The dead of Superga did not die in vain, but they died. In 2005, 56 years after the crash, a memorial match was played between Torino and Benfica, the two clubs that had connected on the last day of Grande Torino's existence. Before the match, the captains of both teams laid wreaths at the Superga Memorial. The current Torino players wore shirts embroidered with the names of the 18 players who died in 1949. In the stands, elderly men who had been children when the crash happened wept openly. The match ended in a draw. No one cared about the score. Today, the Basilica of Superga still dominates the skyline east of Turin. You can see it from almost anywhere in the city, a massive neoclassical dome perched on the highest hill in the Po Valley. It was built in the 18th century as a votive offering by the Duke of Savoy, who had prayed to the Virgin Mary for victory in battle and, having won, ordered the construction of the church as thanks. It is a monument to survival, to gratitude, to the idea that faith can protect you from the worst the world has to offer. And on its retaining wall near the entrance to the courtyard, there is a plaque that tells a different story. A story about a team that flew into the fog and never came out. A story about a city that lost its heroes and a nation that lost its best generation of footballers. A story about a little boy named Sandro Mazzola, who grew up to become a legend because his father was a legend, and because his father was also a name on a plaque on a hillside that he visited every year, standing in the cold with the rest of the crowd, listening to the names being read and answering when they came to Valentino Mazzola, presente. Type voice to generate the 11 Labs voiceover or proceed to skip straight to beats.